Okay, so we still have a couple of people which are taking the sun up there, but we'll start anyway. So hi again, everyone, or for those that joined. So we'll discuss about architecture now. That's a topic I've been spending all my life on production side. There are very, very few meetings that have been in the same time with architects. Surprisingly, because most of the time, unfortunately, this connection between architecture and production is never been made. Some are at the very beginning of the life cycle of IT, and some are at the very end point. And everyone that has been at some point of time on production know that, or has been shouting at the fucking architect that has been designing something that cannot be supported, right? I remember, by the way, at some point of time when a project came in Société Générale, and the guy was saying, yeah, the whole trade has to come back and forth for the whole cycle in less than 20 seconds. Okay, and we have to put that live in 2 months. Like, and we haven't been discussing about monitoring, of course. Like, guys, come on. Okay, step back a bit and let's discuss. So that's why also I'm very happy to welcome some architect people or people with some architect function in their jobs, because I think it's really the key of something sustainable in IT. And actually, Jean-Michel this morning already introduced the topic, and I think it's really worth speaking about that today. So, let me introduce my guests. So, Benoît, Elias, and Katie. So, welcome and thank you for joining. Katie, maybe do you want to start and introduce yourself?
Because I am the only woman here, so let's start. My name is Katie. I am co-founder of API Consulting. So as you see in the name, there is an API, so I'm here for the API part.
Hi everybody, my name is Benoît Fressier. I'm a founder of Siam. I've been a solution and enterprise architect for a long time in my life. I had a chance to manage IT teams and ops teams, so quite interesting. And I'm here to give you a very bad example of architecture, not design, to be supported by ops.
And we are very lucky to have Elias. So for those that don't know yet, Elias, introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Emery. So I'm Elias Serami. I'm the architect with 40 years of experience. So, and I'm the guy who was asking for the 20 seconds. And I have spent half of them, of the 40 years, in Société Générale, in architecture, in different functions, different positions. I have a very privileged solution with production teams. Now I'm operating on my own and still working for banks, essentially.
So when we started to think about how we could drive this conference, we decided to divide the discussion on 3 axes. The first one will be about resiliency, security, quality, and observability. Second one about the API, because this is turning all our IT systems into something with a lot of benefits, but also a lot of complexity. And the last one is kind of coming together the 2 first topics. It's that we do have still a lot of monolithic systems. And now we have very new systems with new architecture. How can we manage this hybridization, and how can we manage that until the production? So maybe to start with, on resiliency, security, quality, and observability.
Yeah, maybe to come back to this architecture question, architects are very good in designing solutions. But if you are a real enterprise architect, you will be looking not only to technical things and applications-related things, but also to business-related things. all of that. And if your architecture is not designed to take care of those elements, when you build, when you deploy, and when you run, you're going to miss something. The second dimension, the important one, is about security. So you're going to consider security as an embedded consideration and not as an add-on. So you have security by design when you look to architecture today. When you have open architecture, when you have things that can you have access from the outside world, the consideration of protecting and acting against a potential cyber attack is something you need to consider in your architecture. And this will ring a bell in the resiliency part also. Okay, so you have to consider it from design and build perspective only, and not only by deploying IAM or firewalls or whatever. You have even to protect the software himself from a potential cyber attack. The third element, it's resiliency. This is maybe it's obvious from architecture standpoint. This one is about availability, your ability to take into account an incident, to react toward this incident, to be able to manage your RTO, RPO, and whatever. But if you don't take care of that when you design a solution, when you are looking to how you consider the architecture, what are your technical and infrastructure deployment static, and if you have a BCM consideration to take into account, you need to look to all of that when you are building the solution. And not only from technical standpoint, but people would say we are going to deploy multiple infrastructures. And not only that, because with a kind of microservice-oriented architecture, even the application architecture should be resilient. And it's not the same consideration as you look to mainframe thing, for example. So things are changing, are moving, and you have a lot of vertical and horizontal dependencies. You need to take care when you are talking to resiliency. And finally, the last one is about observability. We can call it monitoring. When you have a sliced architecture, multiple components, multiple layers, multiple technologies, multiple components, you need to take care of all of that. And not only from technical standpoint, from business standpoint. You can call it business activity monitoring. It's your ability to react when your business is compromised. And even to prevent your business to be compromised. And you are, in this case, you are taking care of a production issue and not only an architecture issue. So you can take it as even a business need, and even if the business is not talking about that, you can bring it into this area. Okay.
Maybe a quick question for everyone there, and it's the time where you may fall asleep, so waking you up. Can you raise the hand for the people who often see meetings with architect and production people discussing about production or resiliency in the same meeting? Can you raise your hand if you see that in your organization? Oh fuck. Okay. It's okay. Yeah, regularly. Maybe let's say once a month or something. Okay, so, okay. No wonder why at the end something is not working. And yet it's quite simple governance. I mean, just setting governance on that is something quite efficient. No, you don't think, Elias?
Yeah. In fact, what I'm saying here is something that architects should take into consideration from production people standpoint, as he's taking consideration from IT development standpoint and from business standpoint. It's the same. They are the third party of the equation, and they have potentially the same weight. Because if I can ask another question is, how many of you took into consideration the production stakes by making a decision?
In the past, I saw actually, I think it's working better also when you have local architecture. Because when you really are on the same floor, facing the same business and so on, it's the one time in my work life where I saw architects, even during crisis, those people who are joining because they had the whole view of the ecosystem and they had very valuable things to say in case of a major incident.
This is what we have worked on in SG, in fact, by making the architects embedded into the teams and near to the business to have this continuous conversation about that. And it's important because even the architect can help the production to bring some key messages to the business, and in the other way around, production can help architects to bring some key messages to the business, like monitoring, for example. Everybody consider monitoring as a technical point. It's not so technical as that.
It's funny because it's coming to something that we didn't plan to discuss, but actually I realized that architecture is a transversal IT function, same as production. And same as production, actually I saw in many banks or many institutions I've been working with now, that the budget is very limited, the role is poorly designed, and even though it's two transversal teams, the interaction is, as we said, not really designed either.
There is another very important key point. Those teams requires a lot of expertise and experience. And this is a scarce resource, in fact.
Go and discuss with architects, honestly, very valuable. Benoit, so coming to some maybe concrete examples that you could see in your work life.
Okay, this one might look familiar to some of you. I'm not saying it's about you, I'm just saying the story should ring a bell. Okay, so as you might know, part of the industry in bank and insurance has been digitalizing their client journey for decades now, and it's still going on. And we had the chance to audit for a client one of their client journey on a specific product. It's interesting enough to see how the course of things happened. Okay, so first of all, they were architects, so they didn't want to redo codes they have already. Okay. Second, they didn't want to duplicate the data. And third, of course, the driver as cheap as possible. Okay, which is not architecture, but this is always a driver of something we do. So they decided to leverage their legacy components. Okay, so be ready. 25 applications in the client journey, which is B2C, of course. Then they say, okay, we have to move to cloud, so let's do microservices, okay, on top of that. So they did 40 microservices. So you have now 65 components over there for a client journey, which is one interface for the client. And of course, no involvement of the production at any time, because they don't meet, as we said. Okay, so you can figure out probably something quite interesting. Do you have an idea of the resiliency, availability of this kind of design? To give you an idea, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but maybe someone has the math, but if you have a 99% availability on 20 critical components, okay, so this one have to be up so the journey works. The real availability of your platform is 82%, because it's 99 to the power of 20. Okay, so that's the reality. Is like when you build something like that, not only you have to operate it, but the reality is not really working. Okay, so quite interesting case of something that has been built on clear foundations, like we don't want to redo codes, we want to... so the urbanization was not so bad in the process, but at the end of the day, it was a tremendous problem. And they had a lot of work to do to be able to operate correctly this system. Production had to jump in. They discovered that all the components now were working together. So I'll let you guess how you have to change the process also. It's quite interesting. And at the end of the day, they had to do something that is never thought in this kind of approach. When you do these big platforms, we will talk about again later on. They have to do a lot of decoupling. Okay, so they have to reinvest. They have to be asynchronous wherever they can, so component can be separated. And it's always something that is never invested in, but with new architecture, there are some benefits. Production is difficult, but there are some benefits, and they had to rework so they can follow a zero fault tolerant approach, so they can benefit from Kubernetes and things like that, really, and not just the pain of setting it up in a cluster. Okay, so that's an example I wanted to share with you to give you an idea of if you don't do the right design, you can end up in a very difficult situation. So the system was just not up 1 day per week. Interesting.
So Katie, we have a new revolution in the IT world since now a couple of years. It looks maybe a way long before. Actually, it's turning massive since a couple of years. It's super attractive. When it's coming into an IT organization, everyone wants its own API. So they're multiplicating like I don't know, like Pokemon. But how do you manage that actually, and what are the two key points there?
Today, we are not that successful as the AI world, because the bullshit word now is the AI. So the APIs has fallen behind. But I think that today I'm going to just work through my journey. So we all know that in the API world, we are all selfish. So we build our APIs. We say that we are expert of everything. I'm designing the API. I'm managing the API through an API gateway. So at the end of the day, this API has to go through production. So here comes the problem. At the beginning of this journey, I didn't even think about the guy that would manage these APIs, but I just think that myself, as an API designer, as an API expert, as an API manager, could be also the API production engineer. So if it is just for an internal use, it's okay to just manage your API by yourself with this API gateway in between everything, that you have to put every API exposed through them. But once we start to connect with partner, things goes wrong. So here we go. Okay, Katie, how can I know that this API works? I didn't think about the health check. This is a tricky thing, like you can call these endpoints and then the backend would say, yes, I'm up. That's it. But at the beginning, since I'm from a development point of view, I designed the API, I manage it, so I'm not even aware about all the observability, all the production thing. And then when I have to scale this API, problem comes from everywhere. And then we start to contact the production team. Hey guys, I'm kind of stuck here. So how can you help us? Then the guys goes through all the components, and then we missed everything. So that was my journey back then, since today, I think. But the real thing is that as the API grows in popularity, so I think that all the stakeholders knows exactly what is the importance of those things, because we as architects, I think 5 years ago, start building those APIs in our our own experience, just to push it to be used in the company. But then today, as it grows in popularity, so all the stakeholders knows exactly the importance of those things. So starting for the beginning today, we can have at the beginning of a project, a big project where the architects are there, and then the API expert just play the roles as the API expert, not as this guy that knows everything about APIs anymore. So we are there to think about how this API can be well managed in the future. Well, so my role would be, okay, let's design the health check. Let's think about how many endpoints should we expose. Let's think about how many APIs should we expose, because I can give you an example. Let's think about a domain. So I'm calling an endpoint. This endpoint would go through all the orchestration inside your SC. So, yeah, yes. So the problem with this endpoint is that, okay, it's going to call maybe 5 applications behind. The problem is that if I didn't design a very well health check, so it just go through the first application and don't go through all the application that has to be called. So this where the API design play a big role in the production world. Like I should know all the stacks that will get involved during this orchestration phase, so I can at least design this endpoint. The health check is not just, okay, it's up, but it has to go through all the application to say that it's actually up. So that's my journey, but that's also the journey of all the clients that I see out there. especially the banks and also the insurance. But that's the word now. And unfortunately, I think that we think as an API expert that we can do everything, but at the end of the day, we find ourselves to be lost in the production world, and all those people, we have to think about them, we have to consult them, we have to work with them since the beginning of the API project. So that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. I think something interesting is that also the predictability of the success of one API is something super tricky. Because you build something, before we were building monoliths that were very much aligned with a business needs, a business sponsor, business users, and so on. And now, it's very different. The paradigm is very different. So you're building something, and I saw in IT organizations sometimes where you're building something and there's a very strong success. I don't know, you've been doing reporting or whatever, data retrieve or whatever, and the predictability is very tricky because you're building something with a need, but maybe somehow, and that's a very good thing, by the way, for the cost, for the architecture, for lots of purpose. But how can you really be sure on how to design the maintainability, the architecture, the hardware, and so on? It's more tricky, no?
I think that it's like every IT project. We cannot say that the API is successful. I think that we have to see the overall project. If this offer is successful in the real world, so it's okay. So the API is successful in a business point of view, but from time to time, the way that we see it as we design API, we think about the reusability and the maintainability and the observability. So if the project in which this API has been designed has gone wrong, there is no success in there, at least me as an API designer can assure that this API can be reused in another process. So in my past, when I worked for Renault, it has been the case. Like we have this big project and then it doesn't get any client, but at least we can, since we designed very well, not only the API, but the overall architecture, we can reuse them. So I think that here as an IT person, we have really to think about the modularity, the reusability, instead of thinking about what can bring the success of this offer, because it's not on our DNA to think about the marketing side of the project, but at least we are here to maybe even challenge the business guy, like, are you sure that this is the way that you want it to be done? So we are here to keep the gate between, okay, I'm not going to build something that is going to fall apart because it's your only need, but I'm going to design something that will be reusable for the future, even if today I don't see the value directly. So that was my past experience too, so I can speak, I can be,
maybe to add on this one, API could become also a business advantage, because you can have a specific offering of like enabling your client to come into your system, and it could be an interesting shortcut, or sharing data, like the data offer in HG, for example, in capital market. So API could become a business as such also. And if you take it more to the operational processes point, it's a way to facilitate the integration with the platforms in an ecosystem like capital market, for example. So you are moving to something more open and more integrated, and it has an impact directly into business processes. And to get back to the production standpoint, the example of an API orchestrating 5 or 4 backends, if you take it to the monitoring standpoint, if you are monitoring your application and your API, if one of the backend is down, your API is down, you can even prevent a business issue because you are monitoring all of it as a service and not only as components, as a business service, in fact.
Benoit, I think you had a couple of examples in your life again on around that kind of architecture.
So I have to say, I also witnessed projects that works, okay, but this one has an issue, and it's a kind of synthesis of what has been said. So it was internal exposure of API on data. Okay, so it was a data team who produced a system and exposed many data for the company through their APIs. And it was very successful. It was not so badly designed, but nobody thought about monitoring the usage. Okay, who was doing what with that? And at the end of the day, one of their foreign platform decided to use this data platform for internal purpose only to build their B2C, in fact, client journey. So the same story, same issue. And at the end of the day, they discover one day, because it was super urgent and super critical, they discover one day that in fact, all the B2C has been built up on the platform. And they were complaining about the reliability of the platform, the fact that it was going down too often. So they came with all the requirements, the critical requirements of a B2C platform to a data platform and APIs that were just existing for exposure. So when you have APIs, you have to be good on the technical front. You have to do the monitoring, but you have to find ways, and there are many ways, to control the usage, monitor it. People will give the password and the access, and will give the token. So but you can monitor like the volume they request and so on, and prevent, in fact, undesired usage on your platform. Okay, so quite interesting one. They are still working on it, and I think it's going to take years because it changed totally the platform. So they have spin-off one version of the platform to dedicate it to the B2C, so they can move to the necessary level of reliability and monitoring. So it's a project that is been made upside down, I would say.
There is an example in the bank for that is Excel spreadsheets, you know, macros, and they kill your API because they're doing 2,100 call in less than 10 seconds. So. So you have to have in your API a license to kill. You know, it's kind of, I shoot this client because he's killing me, in fact.
So you can keep the mic, Benoît, because we are going to discuss about actually this hybrid architecture that we have, because we are in transition. Katie said it, even the focus is not 100% on that now, because we have so many IT transformation these days. It's quite tricky to know where to put the focus now. So we are already in a stage where we have to live with an architecture which is very hybrid. And for the maintenance and even for keeping the control, it's super tricky.
So same as a previous discussion. So probably you all face that. You have legacy systems. Most of the time you are not going to go in a big V cycle, invest over 3 or 4 years. No one is funding this anymore, right? So you will figure out, and you will in fact use a very old strategy, which is peeling the monolith. Okay, so you're gonna output some functions out of your legacy system, and you're gonna make this work together with your legacy system. So most digital banks of the biggest actors works like that. They still have mainframe, but you have the feeling this is very digital. And so this strategy has been going on. And what is quite new now is it has been mixed up with the injection of you have to move to the cloud, which is creating extra issues, in fact, because now you have monolith, but you have also plenty of microservices, because if you go to the cloud, for some reason, everybody wants to do microservices. This is for you. And and of course, so this is creating a lot of complexity, because you have to operate usually on different data centers, sometimes externally. And all of this is still from a client standpoint, which could be internal users or real clients. It's still one system and one feature and one service. Okay, so this is where starts the complexity, in fact, of this, and you can foresee this is going to grow. Okay, because the legacy is going to remain, and everybody is moving to the cloud, necessary or not. Now some don't go, but so this is an interesting point. So what can you do there, in fact, to operate this kind of system, and what are the challenges, in fact? One of the key challenge for production usually is like if it's one key system. We talked about this already earlier on. Sorry, you will have to find teams that can operate legacy components, but also have the competency and organization to monitor quite new components. Okay, probably many of you are facing Kubernetes. It looks simple, but most of the people don't know really how to operate it. It's quite complex in reality. And if you ask this to a production team that has been trained and formed to maintain all monolith, it's quite a challenge. So you have to review your process, you have to think about your tooling, because it has to go through the various data centers, the firewalls, and so on. So it's not that simple. Probably most of you face that. If you have APIs, you have also the issue of going down to the monolith, the whole system, with new usage and new consumption. So all of this is quite a challenge. At the same time, when you build it, you have another challenge. How do I guarantee not only the production, but the performance of my system? How I'm able to bench it? Very, very difficult. Never thought before. So first you deploy, then you have a performance issue, and then you cry because you never thought about it. So that's a really big challenge, and which is very good too. As much as you move forward, if you don't build it correctly, you will have testing issues, because your users will tell you, "I want to test end to end," and it's going to be super difficult for the production team to be able to replicate such a massive architecture with components in many different places. Okay, so all of these are the big challenge you're going to be facing, because when we talk about production, and I was happy you mentioned it, we'd never think from the IT standpoint, development standpoint, about the production process, yes, but putting things into productions. And there are a lot of complexity hidden there about how we guarantee the testing, how we guarantee the performance, how we guarantee the delivery itself. It's never thought, and on hybrid architecture, it's a really big challenge. So there are plenty of solutions to solve this, but one of the key elements is quite project oriented. It's usually you don't know you are going to do hybrid. You have first a small project, then a second, then a third, and this is where the production should be very careful about how new features and new architecture are plugged to your legacy system, because this is going very fast and very fast out of control. Okay, so this is something probably you should focus on. I don't know if you experience this, but your legacy system being cramped with many new features connected to it, and nobody thought this as a big platform, but this is what it has become in time. So you should be careful about that. Quite interesting. For production also, when you have to accept it's a platform, again, the skills, the organization, and the right resources, which is very difficult because you have to spread between skills probably people don't share. It's very difficult to have people who are, if you take the oldest legacy technologies, someone that has been working on mainframe, for example, for 20 years, you have few chances he will be very performant for the part that is in Kubernetes. It's not a question of intelligence, it's just not trained, doesn't have the skills. And on the monitoring front, I think there are plenty of things that are existing that you could use classically, the control tower and so on. But something quite interesting that is emerging in the market right now, and you might consider, which is also an old thing that is coming back, okay? Probably one of the big difficulty about this architecture is how do you monitor functionally the architecture? If there is a component that is failing, probably you guys know the component has failed, okay? But who are you going to talk to, and how are you going to describe the incident? Because your users, the component failed, you know they don't care. Okay, they want to know what is the functional impact and so on. And I can see in the market right now, the biggest platform, people are looking back at BPM, okay, because it has become lighter. It can be re-embedded with libraries and so on. You don't need anymore to have a BPM system very complex. You have to reach to.
So and just BPM stands for business process monitoring.
Absolutely. And this technology allow you to see the execution at infrastructure level dynamically. Okay, you can see it at code level, and you can see it as functional level. So everything that will happen on the system is you can know which functional process is impacted. So it's quite interesting solution that is coming back and might be looked at.
I don't know, but you very much pleased Elias because monitoring the business process is one of his mission in life, no?
In fact, this is a very fair point because monitoring from a business perspective is something very key. And preventing or at least alerting the business about a potential incident is very key. And to add on the BPM space, there is a specific technology which is called process mining. This one you need to consider because it's very interesting about how you bring your technical logs to become your business process behavior. If you are able to transform your technical information into functional information, you can get into this point. And you can use it even to monitor your processes in near real time. And this is very important. To come back to this question of microservices and monoliths, it's if I can take something, I use it all the time, is if you use badly agile at scale and microservices, you will have a fragile at scale. Okay, so it's important to use them appropriately. It's not a question of buzzword. You cannot do agile at scale in accounting functions. It's impossible. Okay? So in some cases, you have to consider it. Where do I need to use it? Microservices, if you are fragmenting your information system, you are creating a mess that will be maybe less in building software, but much more expensive in deploying and running. So you have to consider it's the right balance. It's not black and white. It's different scales between black and white. And each use case has a specific architecture pattern. You need to consider it from business perspective.
We were talking about something earlier on, which is quite funny, is also take care about microservices. Because most of the people, in fact, just couple them to the legacy system. So you have a meta monolith at the end of the day. So this is something you should be careful about. Decoupling is quite interesting. It's a strategy that should be thought at the earlier stage of any design.
Opposite side of it, you have people building micro applications with microservices, so duplicating everything, even the data. So.
And so, Katie, now your job is to bring actually a new or formal API strategy in companies which are most of the time relying on monolith. So how do you see this? How do you see this coupling of the two? And do you have a specific recommendation there?
On the recommendation, I think that we all talk about the APIs, but there are a lot of technology out there, like in event-driven, something like that. So I think that before even talking about API, deep dive on the architecture, think about the synchronicity of your architecture, and then ask the right question. If it is relatable to the APIs, so here I am, I can expose hundreds of APIs in unique microservice, but the main problem is that we don't have to duplicate everything everywhere. So just bear in mind that APIs is just an interface between two applications. It doesn't go to bring you any value if you don't even define the value yet before. So think about the core architecture, work with all the team, but the guy in the API world is just there for the governance, to define the data, and to expose the API through the API gateway. He's not there to think about all the architecture point of view. We need all the expertise from architect, production, and everyone. So just bear in mind that if you have this guy, API expert, he is an expert of API, but bring in the discussion everybody in your team so we can at least design a strong architecture before going to the API world. So legacy, monolith, microservice, we can do all the mess, even if we are talking about APIs. So just think about the architecture first. Yeah.
And if you take it from business perspective, once again, it's about slicing and dicing your process, the APIs. It's each step in your process. One API is a step in the process. So if you look at it like that, you are not considering it from the same standpoint. And I can take an example. I call it the velo processing API. So it's taking a cycle. And in early stages of the web portal of francetelecom.com, it's very old. I'm an old guy. There was only a form in the website. And this form was sent to somebody to put with it in the form in the operating system, in the operational system. And we call it the velo processing API now. So, so this is a question of process. Which function are you reaching to do what, coming from whom, going to whom. And this is how you need to consider APIs from a business perspective.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is coming back to my point on transversal function. We didn't, because it was not the core of the presentation, but we didn't refer to the tricky point on who's paying for what on an API, which is coming to the third transversal function, which could be the CIO office, and that should also be part of the discussion, because I saw crazy stories, but at the end, again, so something that was designed as an API, we're having the strongest success, but at the end, it was being paid by one business sponsor, was just saying, hey guys, I don't pay for the whole bank using this API. It's not working like that. And okay, but who gets to pay? We didn't think about it.
No one. But I think that there is a shift on it, because we all know that AI is everywhere, API also. So with all the réglementation, we must use APIs as a business value now. So we can't be anymore like, okay, this API is going to be paid by which in which, but we have in a business unit to value API. So that's the real world that's coming in this year, next year, and the next year too. So I think that this kind of who is going to pay for the API is going to be vanished.
Hopefully, cross fingers. Okay, before closing the conf, do we have questions in the room?
I just want to ask one, because I know most of them there. So guys, as you seem to know exactly what not to do, then why aren't you doing it straight from the beginning?
Worst question ever.
The first thing not to do, don't build micro applications by saying you are building microservices. Okay? The second thing not to do is just building APIs for the sake of building APIs. Okay? The third thing not to do, not to consider monitoring as a given when you are building a software and deploying it. It should be now part of the design and deployment and the cost. It's not something you add on top of, because you cannot monitor, operate, and assume that you are having a good production on this kind of hybrid architecture. And we didn't talk about going to the public cloud, your ITSM processes and all what is behind, and your level of service to your business. You need to consider monitoring as the key. Don't forget about monitoring.
But I think the question of Mohamed was also, okay, so everything we said there is just good sense, right? It's just like, well, yeah, we're learning along the way, but honestly, there's no rocket science there. So, and still, no one raised their hand. And
no, but, architecture maturity is quite low in many organizations. Okay, as it was explained, you have a few experience profiles. Many organizations at some point believe they have the right skills to go to certain type of project, certain type of strategy, and they fail because they are not mature enough. So that's why we carry on building things that don't work quite often. I think one of the best practices I've seen, quite interesting recently, is to have also a kind of production PO involved into the project. Quite interesting levers for understanding how it is built and be able to influence the way systems are built for productions. But I think quite of bad systems are not built by bad people, they are built by lack of maturity most of the time.
I won't say the name, but very recently discovered an IT organization of 1,500 thousand people and one architect.
And probably he is not a mature architect, because otherwise he will not be by himself.
He didn't know that before joining, I guess.
And on the API side, don't do code first, do design first. Because if you waste your time producing your API, and at the end of the day, you just figure out that it doesn't reply any requirement, and your customer is not going to use it. So you just waste your time and waste your energy. And I'm going to be there to say, no, this is not the governance that we are in place. So design first. It will save you time and money. And it also will bring everybody in the same table and get agreement before building the API. So that's
maybe also a very important point, and it brings us back to the expertise of architecture function. Is if you look to the historical view of information system, it was mainly procedure-driven applications. You have a procedure to open an account, and procedure to have a credit card, a procedure to ask for a check, and you can add on top of it. And if you take it from a front to back perspective, you have a procedure to have a sale, you have a procedure to trade, you have a procedure to control and book, and you have a procedure to confirm, and another one to settle from capital market standpoint. Now you are opening the system, you are giving the client the ability to be intrusive in your information system and processes. And lots of people are talking about value chain, journeys, and whatever. So it's moving to process-oriented information system. And when you move to process-oriented information system, you're gonna go across the information system for one simple journey. And who is the knowledgeable guy about where we need to go to have the right service in the right place? You ask whom in the organization? Because if you are looking vertically to an application, it's easy. I talk to my BA, I talk to my application manager, I get it done. And to figure out the right solution with people specialized each in his silo, you need people making the links. You can call them architects, you can call it whatever you want, but you need those guys. And you need them to know about what is in the system today and how the system should look tomorrow. And this is it, in fact.
So listening to everything you said, it brings me to the conclusion that on SRE, which kind of is the future of operations, we should add a fifth dimension that should be liaised with the architect, actually, because today it's, although it's stepping back, it's a shift left in the cycle, it's not explicit that it should go to the very left, and we should add that, so we'll send an email to Google.
There is another dimension that should be considered also, because IT production is part of business production now. So you need to have business production guys.
You're very right. You're very right. Thank you so much to the three of you.
Thank you for the audience. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you very much.